Good.
Now we're good to go. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome NBC and Fox Sports broadcaster Laffit Pincay. Give him a big round of applause.
Thanks, guys. Good morning. Good morning.
Well,
Thanks, Nancy.
I had to clarify that, you know, if you were here to see Laffit Pincay Jr.,
That's so
the
misleading.
Hall of Fame
Do you know how
jockey,
disappointed these people are?
I said leave. But they will not be disappointed because you are a wealth of knowledge as well.
Appreciate it. They're
Yes.
still disappointed,
No.
but thanks.
No, because you yourself have seen just as many spectacular moments just from a different vantage point.
Yeah, and my father did ride here. He won some big races here. There was a big gray filly that he won I believe it was the Fantasy. Heavenly Cause, trained by Woody Stevens. And he had some good moments here. He always liked coming here. He said President's Day was the first time I'd ever been to Oaklawn. And you hear these things. You hear about this really fanatic fan base that loves thoroughbred racing. You see it at Saratoga. You feel it at Keeneland. And until you experience it, you don't know if that's just narrative or if it's legit. And despite the fact it was in the low 40s here at Oaklawn on a Monday, albeit President's Day, you can still feel the energy and the buzz in the building and a true love of the game, and experiencing it for myself for the first time. Couldn't wait to come back. And now I'm told Rebel is, okay, whatever I experienced is like, multiplied by 10, and then Arkansas Derby is incredible as well. So looking forward to both of those events, and certainly today's day of racing.
Well, let's rewind a little bit and talk about growing up with a Hall of Fame jockey as a dad, because you got to experience things obviously a little differently than most kids. Your favorite horse, I love the quote that you said, if you get to be around, if your family member has any experience with a Kentucky Derby winner, right, that's obviously your favorite horse.
That's a rule. Yeah, if you're associated with anybody in your family who's connected to a Derby winner, that's your favorite horse. So yeah, I wasn't old enough to appreciate it. Watching it back now on this old decrepit VHS tape, I can kind of relive my father's only Derby win on Swale. He's obviously the first that comes to mind. But the truth is, Nancy, my sister and I, we didn't grow up around the racetrack. It wasn't necessarily the fan-friendly place that it is now. You didn't bring the kids to the track right back then like you do now. So I didn't get a chance to appreciate it as much. But once I did and started to understand what he did as a business, and I think for me it was a way to kind of just, father and son to connect, taking more of an interest in what he did. It was awesome. And I'm, a young teenager and bugging Dad about what good 3-year-olds he's riding. And do you have anything for the Breeders' Cup? He's like, have you done your homework? Worry about your own business. And it was a lot. It was exciting. It's scary as well.
Yeah.
It's obviously very dangerous in most cases. If he's in some sort of accident or a spill, somebody will have the common sense to pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, Dad's okay, but he was in an accident. So at very least, it's not that serious. Being there when he's involved in a spill is terrifying because you don't know right away if it's okay. So there's definitely, there's the highs and lows, the thrills of watching him do well and watching him compete. And also at the same time, knowing that, he's in, it's a very dangerous occupation that he's involved with, that in the end, we were very fortunate, albeit ironic, that it was a broken neck that gave him the chance to walk away from a sport that I don't know that he ever voluntarily would have.
Now, a lot of people looked at your dad as a machine. And I was actually had the fortunate where I was living in Los Angeles and working at Hollywood Park to be around him a little bit. And he was so disciplined. Not like a lot of other people would be, but still later in his career, just so disciplined in his work ethic, in his diet, just in his daily life in general. And he kind of became the model to a lot of other jockeys coming up. David Cohen references him to this day. Who did he look up to? I know Shoemaker was one. How was that instilled in him?
He really idolized Shu as a rider, as a person. He couldn't understand how Shu could get beat in a Grade 1 stakes race by a nose, and 20 minutes later, Shu's good. You know, back to the room, shower, change, upstairs, hanging out, and he was good. Where my father, it would just bug the hell out of him for an extended period of time. That was something he always admired, that Shu could leave it in the jocks room, and something he strove for as he got older and matured. As far as, you know, the discipline aspect, and I think, you know, if you followed racing enough, you know that when my father was, like, he wasn't built to be a rider. He just wasn't. He was thick. He kind of jammed that square peg into a round hole for a long, long time, and surviving on 600, 700 calories. That's just not enough when you're doing something as physically demanding as trying to harness these big racehorses. And I think that the one thing he'd like to have back is that regardless of how much success he had and how well he did, he didn't really get a chance to enjoy his career. He was always, you know, hangry, so to speak. He could have a big day and win several races and go out, and it's not like he could have a drink that night. He couldn't have, you know, a steak dinner or whatever. He'd be 6, 7, 8 pounds overweight. So I think that's a big part of the reason. And everybody asks me now, how's Dad doing? And I'm so proud to say he's probably happier now in life than he ever has been, because he gets to really enjoy things, as opposed to when it was work, it was all work. And even if it wasn't riding at the track, he's, you know, at home counting calories, which isn't a lot of fun either.
Well, I was actually there the day at Hollywood Park that he tied Shu's record of 8,833 and then broke the record of 8,834. And it was a celebration in the winner's circle at Hollywood Park.
It was great. And the trainer he did it for, running horses here today, legendary Richard Mandela, on a horse named Irish Nip.
6-1, I think.
Actually, yeah. And Mandela's instructions in the paddock were taken back. So naturally, my old man put him on the lead. And he went wire to wire. And I think that it wasn't necessarily the number or the idea that he had, at the time, won more races than any other jockey. It's just that in baseball, when you do something, you know, when you accomplish something that I don't know, what Babe Ruth did, or in basketball, what Michael Jordan did, or in football, what Joe Montana, anytime you eclipse something Bill Shoemaker did in thoroughbred racing as a jockey, you know you've done something really, really special. And I know how much it meant to him that Shu was at the track. My father got into this kind of, he was running like one race a day, and then he'd get blanked, and then he was like inching towards this thing. And Shu was like, would you get to this record and break it already so I don't have to keep coming to the racetrack? And when he finally did, again, it was the association with Shu, the fact that Shu was there, their friendship, that's what made it the most special to him.
That kind of seems to be the trend. Like when somebody is that close to a record, it kind of just like stalls out.
Slump.
Yeah.
Jockeys and trainers approaching a milestone, slump. bet against.
Never fails. So a lot of times in horse racing, there's a generational aspect. You're followed kind of in your father's footsteps, keeping in the horse racing game, but you kind of chose to go a different route. Did your dad ever say pursue something else, but you kind of charted your own path?
He knew this was what I wanted to do. He didn't understand it, because if there was one aspect of his job that he didn't like, was any form of public speaking. The night before a big speech, like, he didn't sleep. When he got the George Wolfe Award,
which is a huge, huge honor, by the way. It is given to a jockey who has, help me out here.
Your respect, it's
voted on by your fellow peers.
And that respect from the guys that you're in the locker room with, you're in the jocks room with, means a lot. You can see for any jockey, and you can only win it once, any jockey who wins a George Wolfe Award, it means the world to them. And my father's English was still coming along. He was very young, and he was terrified to give this speech. In fact, he still hasn't seen this. This is incredible. He still hasn't seen his plaque, his bust at the Hall of Fame at Saratoga. Still hasn't seen it.
Wow.
Because when he was supposed to accept the award and go give the speech, he had had a spill at Del Mar, ribs, collarbone, whatever the case may have been. Maybe he could have made the flight out there and been part of the ceremony and given the speech, but he said the one upside about being banged up and having broken bones, he's like, man, I didn't have to give that speech.
Wow.
And he, you know, and for that reason, for all those times he's been to Saratoga, he flies in, he rides, would fly out, and he hasn't been back since he retired. He still hasn't seen his bust at Saratoga. But yeah, he's like, I can't believe you're choosing to do the one thing that I hate doing more than anything else, being in front of a crowd, giving speeches, being in front of a camera. So yeah, we're in the same industry, but obviously
do you think he's maybe living vicariously through you?
But he's kind of learned to enjoy it now. All of a sudden, later in life, he'll voluntarily give a speech at dinner. Or if somebody asks him to speech, where perhaps in the past he would have figured out a way how to duck it, now he's really happy and gets excited to do it. There's a couple of things he's really focused on in his retirement. He golfs now. He never had a hobby. He's like obsessed with it. If it's not raining, when there's been so much rain in California, he's out golfing and doing a lot of just showing up and meeting fans like yourselves and giving some of these speeches and sharing some of his life experience, a lot of that reflecting that he didn't get a chance to do then, that he enjoys much more now.
Well, obviously a little too big to be a jockey.
That
Didn't
wasn't
follow
gonna
in
happen.
Dad's footsteps.
Yeah.
So lean towards the broadcasting aspect. So how did it come into play where you picked up with horse racing?
Huge, just a big sports fan growing up. And I always found that, to me, you know, the coverage made the event seem bigger when, I'm a big Dodger fan, but when Vin Scully did either a Dodger game or a national baseball game, it just, you heard his voice, it felt better. The production, how a big show was introduced, it made the event feel that much bigger. And I felt that it was a way to stay close to sports without actually participating. I was a decent athlete, but I was too big to ride. I was too small to do anything else. So I thought that television might work, and had my first job at 23 at News 12 in the Bronx. We were a one-man band running around with a tripod over our shoulder. We were our own segment producers. We drove ourselves around. We edited all our own stuff. But you learned to, it was a great, great start because you weren't just in front of the camera. You learned all the other aspects of television, what it takes to put together a broadcast. And that way, so when things do happen in television and live television, there's going to be technical mistakes. When you've worked on that side of the camera, you tend to have a little bit more patience when you're on this side of the camera because you realize it doesn't happen through osmosis. It's not magic. Television is not, it's not easily done. It's supposed to be made to look easy, but it's tricky. It's difficult.
Now, did I read that you worked with Natalie Morales?
We were both at News 12 in the Bronx, and Natalie couldn't have weighed 90 pounds, and she's running around
she still
the
looks
set.
like
She's
a wet
yeah,
noodle.
she's small, she's tiny, she's incredibly talented and super sweet. But yeah, Natalie running around in the Bronx with a tripod over her shoulder in the South Bronx. That's where that was her I believe her first on-air role, and in a blink her talent and brilliance was recognized, and she's been with NBC and did the Today Show all these years. Yeah,
So you
she's
both
incredible.
cut your teeth in the Bronx and are both working big time at NBC now.
Yes, her career's been incredible. She's been unbelievable. How quickly it happened for her. For me, I didn't wind up working with NBC much later. For her, it seemed like it was an overnight thing. James Rosen was there when I was there, the White House news correspondent for Fox News Channel. It was this little tiny outfit where they wanted young, inexperienced, naive on-air personnel that were really willing to take crumbs for a paycheck.
What was the
But it was a
worst story
start.
that you covered?
Worst story. We saw a lot of things. Unfortunately, there was the Amadou Diallo shooting. Not
Well, don't
to
give me
take this
anything
down
like
into a
too-
horrible,
I mean, what was the-
tragic. I'm just saying that was obviously something very horrible. We followed.
Like a donut eating contest.
Okay,
or
so no, I'll tell you a funny story. There was a reporter, and you had a tripod set up just like that. But again, like I doubt very much you had to set this whole thing up yourself. So what you would have to do as a reporter, you would set that up, and then you'd put an object on the floor, and then you'd focus on it and hit record, and you'd go to that object and stand there with the mic. And you go back behind the camera, rewind, play, am I framed? And you'd be walking back and forth trying to get your shot in focus and make sure you're framed up as best as you possibly could So one of our reporters was doing this in the evening, and while she's setting up, trying to get ready for her shot, somebody literally just walked up to the tripod and the camera and walked off with it.
They stole her equipment?
Took her equipment and looked at her
What
like,
was the Bronx?
What? What are you going to do? Down the street.
She got jacked.
She pretty much got
She
jacked.
got jacked.
Yeah.
So take us from the Bronx to working for NBC on the Derby coverage.
I worked with HRTV for a long time, and then I got a phone call from one of our executive producers, Steve Nagler, who used to work with Monday Night Football with Fred Godelli when he was producing Monday Night Football, who was now at NBC. He still does Sunday Night Football, but for 1 year he did the Triple Crown. This was in 2011, and that winter I got a call when they were expanding their coverage, because it used to be the NBC broadcast used to be 2 hours, an hour and a half on NBC, and that was it.
And
now all of a sudden we had and back then it was Versus before it became NBCSN, and we had a 5-hour undercard. And he asked me if I was interested in hosting those undercards for that first Triple Crown, and that was the beginning of the relationship with them. It was a massive jump and a big difference as to what I was doing at the time, but it was great, and it's been going on a 9-year relationship now. And the one thing, if I could take the audience behind the curtain for the moment, that I'd like for them to understand when they watch one of our shows this spring is the genuine friendships and chemistry that lives within that family. It is a family, and everybody kind of looks out for one another. There is people bouncing ideas off each other. This is the on-air personnel. There was a true sort of a friendship that exists, and why we get so excited and look forward to seeing each other and working with each other every spring.
Well, I don't know if a lot of people know it, but one of your on-air coworkers, Randy Moss, grew up here in Hot Springs and got his love of horse racing right here at Oaklawn Park. And I know you two have a really close relationship. Yep. You've gotten to work with some amazing people, Jerry Bailey, Gary Stevens, and just some great minds who can dissect a race.
Watching Randy and Jerry, their preparation is, no stone to be left unturned. If they haven't been to a trainer's barn in the morning, they're on the phone with them. By the time they sit down and do any broadcast, they really don't need their past performances. They really don't need their notes. It's already stored. And you can't manufacture the kind of chemistry that they have. I tease them all the time. I'm like the fifth wheel here, on a date, and how hard they work. I think that, as I understand now that you have so many of these networks dedicated to a sport, whether it's basketball, football, baseball, and some of the feedback I've heard from producers and management is that sometimes it can be tricky taking an athlete once they've retired, putting them in a studio, and they're going to rely on their experience and react to what they see on the screen based on what they experienced in their career. That's one of the biggest differences with a Jerry Bailey. It's that's not the case. He's going to put in just as much work to be that much more familiar with the owners involved, the trainers, the jockeys, the horses. The preparation is first thing that comes to mind, and how poised these guys are on a big day, their chemistry. And honestly, as a host, it just makes your job that much easier.
And there is an immense amount of prep work. Not only just for one race, the Kentucky Derby, but like say, for example, today, where there are 4 stakes races, and Laffit, his co-partner today, is Tom Amos, a trainer. That's just an unbelievable amount of work. Do you find doing your prep work, your homework, is it past performances? It's watching videos, the previous races. How much time do you spend going in? Because the work sometimes starts before the entries are even taken. You have a good idea of who is going into the races, so you can start pre-prep work. But when do you start actually doing the work when you know that you're coming in for a race?
When it becomes second nature, where you could bump into anybody associated with a horse in that race and have a conversation, that's what you want. You don't want to have to. Of course, you're going to have your past performances out in the notes and all that, but for the most part, you'd like for it to be just kind of a running narrative, and that horse's previous races, kind of like a movie you just watched that you're still very familiar with. For something as big as the Derby, I mean, you start as soon as some of the point races, some of the prep races, distributing points start being run. You're starting at that point,
Right.
so that somebody just mentions a horse's name and you're already very familiar with that horse, and again, can have a simple conversation like we're having here without having to do a bunch of, research and shifting through your notes on the spot. That's the goal.
Through your time at the Kentucky Derby, who was the one standout winner that just immediately pops out of your mind?
Oh, wow.
'Cause you've seen some good ones just in that last couple span of years. You've already seen 2 Triple Crown winners.
Pretty amazing.
Which is amazing.
We went for so long. What Justify did last year, when you consider how fast he went in that opening half mile, is, that's the signature moment. When we look back at his Triple Crown run, the fact that he won a Derby in his 4th start, or the Triple Crown in itself in his 6th start, that's incredible. And bucking history and doing it without the seasoning and as much experience. But I think 45 to the half in the Kentucky Derby.
That's insanely fast.
Bob Baffert and Jill were watching the race on a monitor with no sound in the trainer's lounge. The sound wasn't up for some reason at Churchill. And Bob says to him after they show the half-mile fraction, he's like, "That's pretty fast, 46." And she's like, "Bob, that's 45." And he said, we're done. Elliot Walden of Windstar watching, 45. He starts looking for audible. There's no way this horse is going to finish after going that fast.
At that distance.
At a mile and a quarter in his 4th lifetime start, with a good horse tracking him that took a run at him in Good Magic and audible coming late. I don't know that performance will ever get the credit it quite deserves. It was unbelievable in terms of just sheer guts, class, and determination. Justify's Derby is the one that comes to mind.
Now, in that same token, is there a horse that has really, really surprised you that you thought should have won, that kind of got the shaft?
In the Derby?
Any race, any Triple Crown race.
Oh, wow. We can, the disappointment of I'll Have Another not running in the Belmont Stakes. That's been, I remember that particular production meeting. We had just had our final production, on a Friday. This was the day before, and like 10 minutes after the meeting, we all got called back in, and the news was like getting just kicked in the gut.
Explain again, just because that's been a while. Explain to the fans.
So I'll Have Another had won the Derby. He had won the Preakness. And again, this is before American Pharoah. This is a few years before. And our last couple of trips down for a Triple Crown attempt, we remember Big Brown, and he was supposed to be the mortal lock of the century in the Belmont and was virtually eased at the top of the stretch. And I think that there was a belief in racing that we might not ever see a Triple Crown winner again, that horses just weren't durable enough to win those 3 races in the span of 5 weeks. But here's I'll Have Another, and you could tell he was getting stronger and stronger. And Bob Baffert actually had this conversation with John Service, with Smarty Jones. He says, don't worry about the 2 weeks in between the Derby and the Preakness. It's the 3 weeks in between the Preakness and the Belmont. That's what they start tucking up on you. That's where they start losing some weight. I'll Have Another was thriving. And it was brought to our attention before it was announced publicly, because we had a 3-hour broadcast all set to go for I'll Have Another's bid for a Triple Crown. So they gave us, we knew a little bit in advance, not much. Rumors had already been circulating, and he had, I believe, an issue with a tendon, if memory serves. And the day before a Triple Crown attempt, the Kentucky Derby and Preakness winner is injured and had to be scratched. And I remember Paul Redham crying in the press conference, explaining to everybody why they had to scratch the horse. And for just as a racing fan, that's why we're here to begin with. And I had never experienced a Triple Crown, obviously, and so excited to see the attempt itself, and being part of the coverage, obviously. And like I said, when they came in and our producers told her the horse is scratched, he's not going to run. We got to figure out a way to fill out these 3 hours. It was,
Was it crickets?
it was just a gut punch.
Yeah.
An absolute gut punch. So I can only imagine what it was for the fans that came from far and near, that had spent the money to go to Belmont that day, to be there to witness history, and just to have the rug pulled out from underneath you. That's who you feel for those associated with the horse and the fans hoping to see the first Triple Crown at the time, which would have been 30 some odd years, whatever it was.
Well, here at Oaklawn, we are extremely fortunate that we've seen some good ones here, some great ones here. Bob Baffert has won 6 runnings of the Rebel since 2010. He always comes loaded for bear. He was second in the Rebel last year with Solimini to eventual Arkansas Derby winner Magnum Moon for the Todd Pletcher barn. As you know, we were running 2 divisions of the Rebel this year due to the cancellation of racing at Santa Anita. Interestingly enough, his 2 runners are both undefeated. They are in separate legs. Do you see a Bob Baffert sweep?
I think so. These horses, they're so good. Baffert has been so good in this race, as you mentioned. Clearly, the barn is now struggling 2 years in a row that they've been defeated. American Anthem, the favorite 2 years back. You mentioned Solimini. Between Improbable and Game Winner, I'm not saying that it's easy to compare, justify American Pharoah, especially Pharoah, who made his 3-year-old debut here, just like Improbable and Game Winner did. I will say that you used to hear Baffert discuss the efficiency of American Pharoah's stride, how beautiful his stride was, and you hear some of the similar description of Improbable in how he moves, how he travels, how he's been working. Game Winner, highly, highly decorated, undefeated, a 2-year-old champion, a Breeders' Cup juvenile winner. And it's interesting that it wound up splitting in the sense that this blew me away just doing some research. Winning matters. Winning these prep races matter. You have to go back to Animal Kingdom, the Derby winner in 2011, to find, follow me now, the last 3-year-old to lose a race at 3 who eventually won a Kentucky Derby. Every one of them since have been undefeated at 3 going into the Derby. You combine it all, it's like 18 for 18, wow. 19 for 19, whatever it is. So that if that trend were to continue and had Improbable and Game Winner gone head-to-head, one of them would have lost at 3. As it works out, they're in separate divisions. Here where Baffert knows how to get his horses ready to roll. I guess with Game Winner, my one hesitance would be this, is that, and we'll discuss this on the show today, that I remember a quote from Baffert before the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and he said, this horse just thrives on racing and training. The more racing and training, the better he is. All right, so if that's the case, without a race in 4 months, is that a vulnerability? If he's that much better with that much work and more racing, is this the opportunity to perhaps catch Game Winner off his A game? Maybe he's one of these horses that really needs a race off the bench. Maybe.
I brought that up on a couple of podcasts that I've done the last couple of days. Both of the horses are coming off a bit of a break. And it's going to be interesting. They've both proven that they can ship and run. However, both coming off a little vacation, and I believe correct me, is it Game Winner that has never broken from an outside post position? Yeah,
not that he's kind of stuck in the middle. Improbable has a post position towards the outside. As you guys know, there's a short run into the first turn, going a mile and a 16. See, if this was the 70s and you had a Manny Akaza out there, an Angel Cordero, like a real enforcer, like an Barcoa, I would think somebody, maybe even Flavian Pratt, drawn right inside of Galilean of Improbable, would make it as difficult as they possibly could. Like, yes, yeah, we're going to try to win this race. We're also going to float the favorite out and make things as tough as they possibly can on Improbable. It's usually not the best business decision for a Southern California-based jockey to mess with a Bob Baffert trained horse, but
career-ending decision. Possibly.
He figures to fall in. The speed is in the first division of the Rebel. The 7 goes. I think Galilean is right off of him. And yeah, maybe Improbable's a couple of lengths wide, but he won't lose that much in a perfect tracking trip sitting just off those two. The way Improbable's been training, I'd be floored if Improbable doesn't win today.
In that
Famous last
second
words.
division, there are several horses making their stakes debut. I mean, when you look at that division, there are a lot of horses still eligible for that first allowance division. And even going into the Kentucky Derby, that fact still exists. So it's quite an interesting setup for both divisions of the Rebel.
Look, yeah, in that second division, Omaha Beach, he's for Richard Mandela. They've been so high on this horse for so long. I don't love the fact that he's lost a lot of close races. His one win was by 8-9 lengths, but he has 3 other second place finishes in there by short margins. Sometimes that can be a sign of a horse who isn't at his best in a real fight. He's been favored in every one of his starts. Omaha Beach, that won't be the case today. But from a talent standpoint and how he's been training in Southern California, I think Omaha Beach is sitting on a big race as well. This race, again, it's just not. Obviously, it feels like the quarterfinal round, and then you move into the semifinals. We're here, the marquee event being the Arkansas Derby. But I think when we look back and we're at Churchill the first Saturday in May, this Rebel Stakes, the 2 divisions, going to have their fingerprints all over how this Triple Crown shakes out.
Yeah, it almost feels like Arkansas Derby Day talent-wise instead of Rebel Day. So it's going to be very interesting setup, but still 2 amazing stakes races also on the card with the Grade 2 Azeri, Midnight Bisou, Elate, and also Shamrock Rose. 3 solid standouts. Tappa. The Broberg horse is scratched or going to be scratched out of that event. Midnight Bisou, do you think it comes down to Midnight Bisou and Elate?
It's hard to dismiss a Breeders' Cup winner in Shamrock Rose. You have the Alabama winner here as well in Eskimo Kisses, but I think this is a starting off point for her. She hasn't raced in a while. I think the mile and a 16th is a little bit too sharp for her. She wants to go a little bit farther. I don't know that there's enough pace for her. I think it boils down to Midnight Bisou and Elate. With Midnight Bisou, her win in the Ladies Classic wasn't all that impressive, but she didn't have much pace to work with. And for her, that was a jumping off point. She has an edge in recency where it's been almost 7 months for Elate. We haven't seen her in a long time. If she's the same Elate we grew accustomed to seeing race in and race out when she was at her very best, yeah, I think she's the one to beat. I was surprised Midnight Bisou was installed as a morning line favorite. I don't know that anybody can definitively say, what to expect, though, from Elate, unless it's in Mott you trust. He wouldn't have her here and she was cranked up and ready to go. Yeah,
he won the Azeri in 2014 with closed hatches. I totally fangirled on her, by the way, when she was here. Stunner. Elate has won off the layoff before. She came off the layoff and won that Dell Handicap really impressively. She likes to run fresh, so I do think she's got her hands full, but I do expect a big effort out of her.
And what a terrific race. And a racehorse that I know was so popular around here in Azeri, a 3-time Eclipse Award winner, a 3-time Apple Blossom winner. It's only fitting that the final major prep for the biggest race for fillies and mares at Oaklawn, the Apple Blossom, lives in her honor.
The Essex looks like it should have a grade in front of it with all of the talent that is in that one. Very competitive field. Giant Expectations gets huge class relief. He's faced graded stakes runners, his last 8 starts. Peter Urton ships him in from his base in Southern California. Is the morning line favorite. Saw favoritism, though. I believe he's 5-2 on the morning line. Is installed as the morning line favorite. Snapper Sinclair shows up, hence Sonneteer. I do see this one kind of wide open. It might be a really good betting race.
I do too. I don't know. I know Giant Expectations. He went wire to wire in a graded stakes race. This was, I believe, opening day 2017, and he beat Accelerate that day. But
yeah, that was his last win.
Very slow fractions that he took advantage of, and that was his last win. The New York bred. California-based, again, it is class relief, but it's a long time since he's won, and I think the pace is going to be hotter than anticipated. He's not going to be able to go out there and lope on the lead. It's a tough Essex, and you're right. There is graded stakes competition in this race without a grading, and for those who perform well, perhaps a shot in the Oaklawn Handicap, the biggest race for males on dirt here for the Festival of the South, and what a show we saw in this division in that race last year with the eventual Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile winner, eventual Pegasus World Cup winner, and City of Light defeating eventual Breeders' Cup Classic winner Accelerate. Who knew?
How defeating do you think that is, Laffit? We just discussed giant expectations. It's been a while since he's made a trip to the winner's circle, even though he's been facing much, much tougher. How defeating can that be for a horse, even though he's been just facing total bears?
Depends on the horse. They're all individuals. There was a line from Seabiscuit when they were talking in the movie itself, when they said he started doing on the racetrack what they taught him to do in the morning, which was to lose. He was always someone's workmate getting drilled, so that's what he did in the afternoons. A horse's confidence can get shook to a certain extent. That's why you hear trainers putting big name horses, in many cases off a layoff, in a softer spot, get their confidence going. But we saw an example of the antithesis of that very theory last week when Tacitus, for Bill Mott, he had been working with the highly regarded Hidden Scroll, the defeated favorite in the Fountain of Youth, and Hidden Scroll was tying Tacitus to his tree. The way they were training together, Tacitus, nobody even know his name. He was just a horse working with Hidden Scroll, and clearly it didn't seem to bother him. All he did was show up and win the Grade 2 Tampa Bay Derby after training with Hidden Scroll. Yeah, he was just happy not to see Hidden Scroll out there. I think that they're all individuals. But yeah, sure, if you're going to concede a short price to a horse in a competitive stakes race for giant expectations, you'd prefer to see a win in their past performances more recent than December 2017.
So given today and the card in its entirety, is there one specific horse that you're most looking forward to seeing?
It has to be, and this isn't a West Coast thing. I stopped rooting when my father retired. I don't care where horses are based that win big races. I don't have a bias one way or the other, but these are the two most anticipated 3-year-old debuts of any horses in North America that we're going to see today. How good is Improbable? Can he live up to the hype the way he's been training? This is the horse who was in Justify stall at Del Mar when he began his career, no pressure. And Game Winner, you have to respect him. There's some blue collar there. He's relentless. He's just a fighter. If you get a chance before today's races, go back and watch Game Winner's Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He's wide on the first turn. He's wide on the far turn. He gets whacked mid-stretch by Knicks Go. I mean, a lot of horses, classy horses, would have spit it out and quit right there. And it's like the more contact he took, the more he dug in, the more he fought. He's not just this brilliantly horse with more talent than everybody else on the racetrack. It's like Game Winner wants it more. We talked about Omaha Beach, and I don't know how much Omaha Beach wants to fight. This guy loves a fight. And the pride you hear from Bob when he talks about him and what he's accomplished to this point. And like I said, this is special. Undefeated, Eclipse Award champion, Breeders' Cup winner, making his 3-year-old debut here at Oaklawn today in the Rebel. This is headline stuff. It's a special day of racing with two marquee names that, if the Kentucky Derby were tomorrow, you'd be talking about the favorite and second choice.
Laffit mentioned going back and watching video, and that's how a lot of handicappers will go and decide on their top selections. When you were starting out going through HRTV and moving on to NBC, was there ever a point where you called your dad and asked for his advice on how to not watch films, but how to analyze certain things?
I didn't know how to watch from a rider's perspective, and watching races for him was really helpful because he would point things out that certain riders were doing in a race that otherwise I wouldn't have picked up on, that now is almost second nature in certain things that you look for. So a big help as far as trying to diagnose what it is a jockey is doing in a race specifically, something a rider did really well, a mistake a jockey made, strategizing beforehand. It's fascinating, these guys, when they're in the same room and they're reading the form, they're not going to share strategy with one another. It's not just about who's the fastest horse in the race. The strategy, especially in just the big fields, and not knowing what the other guy's game plan is going to be. It's the game within the game.
What was some of the best advice that you can share that your dad gave you?
As far as
business, as far as production and broadcasting? Just
to be more process driven than result driven. Enjoy the process, fall in love with the work. And for me, preparing for the show, that's fun. Is it too early to start prepping for Derby or whatever the case might be? I start much earlier now because I enjoy it, trying to get a feel of what things are going to look like by the time race day gets there. And that's part of it that I didn't quite anticipate enjoying it as much when I started was the actual, the preparation, that part of it that becomes more enjoyable, not just the show itself.
So roughly how many hours of prep did you put in for today's show?
You start weeks ago. Just that familiarity with the trainers, the kind of success they've had in the race, jockeys, the success they've had in the race. So that's second nature. Watching tape. You start when you know you're going to cover a major event. As soon as you know that you're going to cover that, you kind of start paying attention then.
So having had covered a couple 3-year-old preps already, do you have that Derby horse?
I think I'll have a much better idea after today. Tacitus was good in the Tampa Bay Derby. That was his 3rd career start. He hadn't raced in 4 months. He has a ton of upside, beautifully bred. He's out of Close Hatches, who you mentioned. He's a threat. I don't think I wasn't smelling any roses after the Gotham with Heichel. I think most of those horses are middle distance horses. The horse they call Wow in the Mark Casse stable. World's getting ready for the Louisiana Derby. He's been excellent and consistent. There's been some inconsistency on the Derby trail this year. We're going to have a much better feel of what the landscape is after we see Improbable and Game Winner this afternoon. I don't have that obsession yet with a 3-year-old just yet. I haven't seen that performance this year just yet.
You haven't had that silent moment yet where you see a horse perform.
No, when we
get the goosies.
When you get tied into a horse, for me, there's an occasional obsession horse. They don't even have to be that good. I was a huge Drosselmeyer fan and was so proud of him when he won the Belmont and the Breeders' Cup Classic. Uncle Mo, I was really drawn towards. Palace Malice was another one. A horse, when you're there, when you see him break a maiden at Saratoga, something along those lines, and you knew of them before they had established themselves. That's how we connect. So yeah, I'm kind of haven't had that feeling today, but by the time the sun sets, maybe we'll all kind of experience that together.
I think you're going to get that feeling today.
With these two, I'm excited. I'm really, really excited to see both of these races and both of these superstars.
Well, it is a huge honor for me to get to share the same screen
Pleasure's
as you.
Pleasure's mine.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a huge round of applause for
Laffit
Pincay. Thank you so much for coming out.
Pleasure, guys. Have a great day at the races and good luck.
Huge honor to have you here.
Thank you, Nancy.